Well, thank you, President Blanton, or Vicki as I know her. Let me say first to all of the honorees and members of the bench who are here, some of whom received awards, and particularly to our student award recipients, congratulations. This is a memorable day and a marvelous way to celebrate Law Day. I am so excited to be with you here today. It is wonderful, Vicki, that I received this invitation, and it will, as I said, be cherished by me in years to come. I want to begin our thinking on how we can live out the Constitution's promise, e pluribus unum, out of many one, which our students captured so marvelously in their essays and photos and drawings. And in doing so, I will help us then, I hope, reflect upon our own promise to support the Constitution and the rule of law, as you renewed it here today. And I'm put in mind of the story of Rip Van Winkle, which some of you may remember, the students may remember it more recently, and most of you remember that Rip Van Winkle was asleep for 20 years. But fewer of you may remember that at the beginning of that story, in the town, there was an inn, and on the wall in the inn was a picture of King George III of England. 20 years later, when Rip Van Winkle returned to town, the inn was gone. It had been replaced by a hotel, and there was a picture on the wall of George Washington. And Rip Van Winkle realized that he had slept through the American Revolution. He'd slept through a time of great change. I begin there because right now in America is a time of great change. Right now, this is a time of great challenge for our profession, for the rule of law, for our institutions, for our democracy, and the unity that we have pledged ourselves to as a nation. Right now, we cannot be asleep. So I'm going to ask you to do 4 things today in the short time that I have with you. The first is to be strong. The second is to be smart. The third is to be outspoken. And the last is to be optimistic. First, be strong. Some of us warned you that a storm was coming in terms of challenges to the rule of law and our democracy. That storm is now here. But lawyers do not shrink from this moment. Lawyers do not back down from bullies. You all may remember the first time you took the oath was not today. If you remember at the culmination of your education as a lawyer and your passage through the bar examination, there came a moment when you and I and each of us, just as we did here today, made a very solemn pledge to uphold the Constitution of the United States, to uphold the Constitution of the state to which we were admitted, in your case, Texas, in my case, Ohio. And we promised that we would make certain that we would both be, whoops, I guess I went one slide too far, maybe. Go back, there we go. That we would conduct ourselves with integrity and civility. Because of that, more than any other profession or job or avocation or calling, the public looks to this profession to uphold the rule of law. We are uniquely qualified to explain the importance of the rule of law. We are uniquely positioned to be heard and trusted on that subject. And we are uniquely responsible to defend the rule of law. We serve and protect the public. We, lawyers, profess justice. Last week, thousands of lawyers across the country, nationwide, from Honolulu to Boston, from Seattle to right here in Dallas, Texas, took the oath of office again, just as you did here today. And thank you, Judge Rutherford, for doing that and permitting me to be part of this celebration and this reaffirmation of our commitment to that oath. So you know you're not alone because we do it publicly, and you've seen each other. If you feel weak at this moment when strength is required, look around. The Dallas Bar Association is a great place to find people who will be strong with you as we face these rough waters. And that oath to practice is not simply something that you took when you came to the bar to begin with. It is found in other places as well, in your commitment to the profession, your commitment to civility, your commitment to preserving and improving the legal system is found in the Lawyer's Creed. It is found in oaths that you take when you join a federal court and become admitted there. It is taken by military officers and by public officials and others. And all of those creeds and all of those professions require that we do more than simply avoid the violation of rules. They require that we are, in fact, upholding the rule and supporting the system that we now enjoy. The preamble to the model rules says that lawyers are public citizens, and that's a role we sometimes don't think about. But what the model rule preamble says is that as a public citizen, we have a special responsibility to the quality of justice. And I want to emphasize that part that says a lawyer should demonstrate respect for the legal system and for those who serve in it, including judges. And I want to pause there for just a second because that is so important. And I'm thrilled that as part of this Law Day, you are honoring your judges by having them here. If I could ask the judges to stand for just a second, so that those in this room can know who it is in this community who upholds the rule of law and does so without favor, impartially. They're the ones who keep this system running. I hope you will help me recognize them real quickly now. And for those of you who don't know them, please get to know them. They are leaders in our profession, and most importantly, they can't speak to you the way I speak to you as a member of the profession. They speak through their orders. They then don't go out on the street in the court of public opinion to defend them. That's my role. That's your role in upholding the system of justice. So we owe them a great debt of gratitude, but the first thing I want you to do is to be strong. The second thing I'm going to ask you to do is to be smart. These attacks on the rule of law look chaotic. In the last 140, 150 days, there have been 140 executive orders targeting birthright citizenship, a person's right to due process, judges and the courts, law firms, bar associations, universities, and it's not just executive orders. Don't get me wrong. I'm not here to talk about one person or one source of conflict in this country. Social media and bloggers and elected officials, the airways are full of noise, misinformation, and disinformation. So let's be smart. We can't respond to everything. You know, I was a trial lawyer, and I had a mentor who warned me about mechanical rabbits. Mechanical rabbits were things that you would sort of wind up and then send off. And in a court case, what it meant was that if you as an advocate were paying attention to everything that the other side was doing, you wouldn't pay attention to the things that mattered. There are lots of shiny objects that are running around. Lots of those are mechanical rabbits. Don't chase mechanical rabbits. Remember the old admonition, if you chase two rabbits, both will get away. So let's be smart. I want to talk to you for just a second about what the public knows and thinks. The World Justice Project asked the public, do you believe the rule of law is crucial to the future of the country? And 96% of them agreed. And equally importantly for our purposes, 90% of the Republicans agreed, and 90% of the Democrats agreed. It doesn't matter whether it's red or blue, Republican or Democrat, all believe the rule of law is crucial to the future of our country. Then the question was asked, how do you describe the rule of law? And to do so in words. And the words that, of course, came up were justice, accountability, safety, and respect, the Constitution, fairness. And then the question was asked, well, what about the current state of the rule of law? How would you describe that? And unfortunately, the answers there were not nearly as happy news. It's biased, unfair, corrupt, political. That conflict between those two is in sharp relief every day. And frankly, it's in sharp relief in this room. All of us have aspirational ideas and ideals about what the rule of law is. And we watch things play out in the real world, and so some of us have the same dissonance that the public has. But here's the difference between you as lawyers and judges and the public. The test of a first-rate intelligence is the ability to hold two opposed ideas in the mind at the same time and still retain the ability to function, so said F. Scott Fitzgerald. And as lawyers, we are adept at keeping two opposing ideas in mind at the same time without going crazy. At least most days, we're able to do that. So, how can we help the public? Well, first of all, how would you define the rule of law? And is it an elevator speech, something that you can do quickly? The World Justice Project, again, as a source, has said the rule of law is an enduring system of laws, institutions, norms, and community commitment that deliver accountability, just law, open government, and accessible and impartial justice. In short, no one is above the law, laws are equally enforced, publicly promulgated, and independently adjudicated. And it's important that we be smart enough, since the public is looking to us to help them with this concept, to be able to succinctly describe and define the contours of the rule of law. So homework for tonight, if you can't do it in 30 seconds, one more thing to think about on your law day. It's disturbing, though, that our democracy is weaker in polls than it was 5 years ago. And this is a poll that was done last year, so before the election. But the answer was the same. Misinformation and disinformation are weakening our democracy. Elected officials, candidates, leaders, many have undermined the rule of law. They've rejected accountability. They've denied that the law is applied equally or evenly. They've denied that government is open and fair. And they've undermined that justice is delivered by competent, ethical, and independent representatives applying the rule of law. But that's what we know our judiciary is. And in fact, we know it because we see it. We, lawyers, see it. We don't just see one headline about some decision. We know that there are hundreds of decisions, that they are procedural, that we can explain what these things are to the public so that they will have an understanding of who is actually rendering decisions and the basis on which they are finding either for or against some action. These attacks have fallen equally on the powerless, immigrants, the poor, minorities, those seeking due process rights, and they've attacked the powerful, judges, courts, businesses, law firms, universities, even bar associations have felt it. And these are attacks by people who are using social media, in some cases unwittingly. They don't know and they don't care about the poison that they're spreading. But there are also attacks by foreign actors who know they are spreading falsehoods about our country and our Constitution and our laws, and they understand full well the division that they are sowing. The problem right now is that a third of the millennials do not consider it essential to live in a democracy, or less than a third consider it essential to live in a democracy. I receive some hope from what I saw today from the young people in this room who will keep that fire burning. So you haven't yet reached age 27, you're not captured by this polling, which is I guess, a wonderful thing. But it's deeply concerning when that generation doesn't find democracy to be essential. So we've talked about being strong, about being smart. Let's talk about being outspoken. As I said, the court of public opinion is not a court. We should say so. We can explain what's happening and make sure that the misinformation and disinformation that is being spread by others, first of all, is not being spread by us and is being countered by us. There are 1.3 million lawyers in this country. Don't get me wrong. We don't all agree. But we've got to speak up strategically, collaboratively, civilly, calmly, truthfully, and effectively so that we can protect the rule of law. So, what can you do? Well, you can speak to each other about this subject. You can speak to your members who aren't here about this subject, to elected officials, to mayors, and school board members, and legislators. Importantly, let's talk to the public in your communities, to your neighbors and your teachers and your book groups and the Rotary and Sertoma and Kiwanis and nonprofits that have opportunities for lawyers to come and be heard about the way this country operates with a set of checks and balances and the way that we treat each other as a country. The Advisory Commission of the American Bar Association exists in part to help with this kind of effort and to connect, to network some of the organizations working in this space. So if there's anything that we can do to help, please let me know. You know, Vicki was kind enough last night to take me to an Inn of Court meeting, and I heard Mark Melton last night, who's a giant in the legal community here, talk about due process and defending justice for tenants. And one of the things he did very early in his work was to post his phone number and his email address, and the phone never stopped ringing. So I'm going to give you my phone number and email address when this is done, and I hope my phone doesn't stop ringing in the future. We hope that you will continue to work with the organizations in this state collaboratively. As the Dallas Bar, I love that you're here with the Dallas Young Lawyers, and you're here with others. There are other associations here with whom you can collaborate, other non-governmental organizations with whom you can collaborate to program and speak out in support of the rule of law. And importantly, what we talk about at the Divided Community Project in Columbus is doing so across difference, of partnering with people with whom you would not normally be seen speaking to the subject because you're expressing common values that bind us together as a country. And so I will encourage you to do that, and at the very end I'll have a QR code to one of the guides that we have published that may provide some ideas about that. In the last few months, many bar associations and legal organizations have spoken very publicly about denouncing attacks on judges and about their support for the rule of law. And I haven't actually read a resolution that you held up, Vicki, but I'd love to see it. I'd love to publicize it when we're done. The American Bar Association, state and local and affinity bars, large and small, trial lawyers, plaintiffs and defense side, the American Board of Trial Advocates, the American College of Trial Lawyers, the American Association for Justice, in red states and blue states, all of them, or many of them, not all of them, many of them have issued statements denouncing attacks on judges and in support of the law, and that is so important. And actions, of course, speak louder than words. So in the programming that is occurring as well, lawyers are doing much good. Last Wednesday, that is to say, I guess 2 days ago, the Washington State Bar Association hosted a CLE program entitled Rule of Law and Constitutional Crises for Lawyer Ambassadors. They created, it's a mandatory bar in Washington, they created an ambassador program of people who would go speak on the subject of rule of law. This CLE last week had 2,000 participants. I don't know when the last time was that you put on a CLE that had 2,000 participants, but I haven't been to that many. I was impressed by that, and I think they're doing some wonderful things. Now, here's the thing. Most of you can stand on a stage and do a better job than I'm doing speaking to these issues. But if that's not your thing, if you want to write, I mean, I saw essays that the young people here did that are marvelous. I'm surprised you were able to get through reading some of that content without tearing up. If your thing is writing, write an op-ed. Write something that people will be able to read. If, or do a small group conversation in your church or your synagogue or your mosque. Find a group that you can communicate with that is not just us talking to each other about the challenges, but is talking to members of our community who will benefit from hearing from you about how you think about this and what tools might exist. The last thing I wanted to talk to you about is being optimistic. We don't need more anger. We've got to get rid of the contempt that we find on social media for other people's words, and frankly for some other people's existence. We have become so callous in some respects in how we communicate. That needs to change. This is not a zero-sum game. We can both reform government if reform is necessary and protect the rule of law. We are able to keep opposing ideas in mind at the same time, and both of those things are possible. We should not permit this moment, we cannot permit this moment to tear us apart, to destroy this country, to destroy these bar associations and relationships that we have. You know, it doesn't matter. I'm from Ohio, so I'm a guest, and I have spoken in different states around the country. And it doesn't matter where you live. It doesn't matter where you practice or what area you practice in, whether your state bar is unified or whether it's voluntary, whether you're in a red state or a blue state, whether you identify as a Republican or a Democrat or an independent. If you are a lawyer, you must support the rule of law. Together, together we've got to educate each other, And we've got to educate the public about the importance of the rule of law and ways to strengthen the rule of law now that it's under attack. Individually, we must speak out in support of the rule of law and our democracy to make sure that we are staying awake during this time of challenge. You know, in 1 year or in 20 years, whether we are at next year's Law Day event or whether we're talking to the next generation of lawyers, please tell them the story about how we stood strong. We stood up. We stood together. We spoke clearly and with intelligence. And we spoke in support of the rule of law, and we then lived out that promise that we made to uphold the rule of law, to make the Constitution's promise of out of many one come true. Thank you for your attention.